Before we dive into today's show, I wanted to make sure you knew about the big giveaway going on over at Equilife right now. We are giving away a limited supply of free vitamin D lab tests. This is a simple vitamin D lab test you can do for yourself or anyone in the family to figure out once and for all what are your vitamin D levels. It's so important that you know your vitamin D levels for your immune system, for cancer prevention, for weight loss, for vision, for muscle metabolism, for blood sugar regulation, and so much more. And remember, whether you're getting sun, whether you're maintaining the tan, whether you're taking a vitamin D supplement, the only way that you know if you are between that optimal 15 to 70 level is to lab test. So don't guess, test. Head on over to stevencabral.com/Equilife to see if you qualify for your free vitamin D lab test that we are giving away all this week over at Equilife. Now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Welcome back, everyone. We're here today on episode 2085 of the Cabral Concept. Great to have you here today. Excited to share with you actually a follow-up because we had a lot of questions about essentially what's being referred to as a new neurotransmitter, galanin, that I spoke about on the Friday Review just a couple weeks back. So I do hope that you've been tuning into those Friday reviews. Love the Friday reviews because, as I always say, anything goes on those shows. That was episode 2072. So not too long ago, and got a bunch of questions. I found it just as fascinating. So again, remember, I always take your feedback. I always listen to your feedback. The Cabral Concept podcast is about you. It's about our global health community. So when something interests you, write in, let me know, and I'll turn it into a bigger show. There's just no doubt about it. But to me, this one's super exciting because I've done a ton of research from when I first started reading about it. Now, the research, believe it or not, has been around since I believe it's the early 1980s. I've done a ton of research on this, read a ton of papers. So I remember it being right around 1983 that this particular neurotransmitter was first discovered. I believe it was Swedish-based work and research that first discovered it. But essentially what they discovered was a inhibitory neurotransmitter. So if I want to step back, just let you know what that is. So when you start to get a lot of stress, a lot of overwhelm, a lot of anxiety in your life, your body, its little neurochemistry set, is supposed to start to produce inhibitory neurotransmitters that help to calm down your body and your nervous system so that you don't become so overwhelmed or anxious. Now, that's how it's supposed to work. The most popular forms of excitatory neurotransmitters are things like glutamate or dopamine or norepinephrine or adrenaline, right? Those are things we try to ramp up. So it gives us energy. We get excited about something. But what happens is when those over time ramp, and we don't have enough of the calming ones, which are the GABA and a lot of the serotonin, we become overwhelmed. We become stressed. We become burnt out. For many years in my private practice, I used to draw a specific diagram, and I would share with a lot of people in my private practice that, and I would actually show them the stress neurotransmitters, that over time under chronic stress, and we would run the stress hormones test, and well, of course we still do this to this day, but we would show them that over time, chronic stress leads to three main feelings that I see come out over and over and over. And those are irritability, overwhelm. Those two are extremely important to look at that. Irritability is just, let me explain that just for a moment. Irritability, this is a chronic based one. This is just the little things no longer slide off your shoulders or back anymore, right? You can't let them go anymore. You become much more irritable. Then the next one is the overwhelm, where it's just like the littlest things seem to set you off. It's just you can't take one more thing. And the last one is feeling anxious. So you feel irritable, you feel overwhelmed, and you feel anxious. And the anxious is this underlying uneasiness. And they even quoted it in the research as almost feeling like you're jumping at every little noise or every little thing that pops about in your life. It's like it's an overreaction right away, right? So it's just you're overwhelmed, you're irritable, and now you're overreacting because of this low-level chronic anxiety. So that's what we look for, especially on what's called the stress hormones mood and metabolism test, which, by the way, anyone can run. We start to see this is exactly what it looks like. And I've been doing a lot of case studies on Thursdays, so hopefully you've been tuning in for those as well. But what happens is we start to see lower morning levels of cortisol, but we still see higher evening levels of cortisol. That is called a dysfunctional diurnal rhythm. That means the body is no longer waking up with the same get up and go due to stress, but it's having difficulty unwinding and falling asleep and getting a deep, rejuvenating sleep at night. This is a hallmark. This is literally a hallmark state of what we call adrenal-based fatigue. Now, technically, it's known as hypothalamus pituitary adrenal dysfunction, but let's use just regular layman's terms, which is great as well. We don't need to be conventional medicine egomaniacal based terminology people, and we can simply say the adrenals, the stress center of the body, are no longer able to keep up in the same way. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if we are to take back our irritability, overwhelm, our anxiety, that we need to begin to rewire our body's ability to deal with stress. And so that's why whenever I see new research on this, and the new research was just published, it's not too long ago, over the last 12 months, we can start to say, oh, wow, there's more to this than just serotonin. There's more to this than just GABA, the anti-anxiety, right, neurotransmitter, and serotonin, the happy, feel-good neurotransmitter. There's more calming inhibitory neurotransmitters than just those. And they're discovered, but now we're starting to learn a lot more about them. So what I want to share with you today is what I spoke about just really briefly on the 2072 podcast, and I'll link that up today. So if you go to stephencabral.com/2085, I'll link up the research as well, which is super fascinating, and how it's being transferred right now from mice-based studies to human studies. And we already know that it's in humans. We already know that it works in humans. But of course, the lab studies always start with mice typically, and then they move to human-based studies. But we don't need to wait. And I'm going to share with you some programs and protocols in order to be able to improve your own anti-anxiolytic-based neurotransmitters. So this is what they found, is that they essentially took mice, which they're using in most of these studies, and they gave them a little shock, which is obviously not ideal for the mice, but it is shocking and it causes stress to their bodies. So what they found was this, that mice that were allowed to exercise for weeks previous to the electric shock better handled the stress from the shock and were better able to go about their normal daily activities rather than shying away and staying in what was a more overwhelmed based state. So this was really interesting, but they didn't stop there. They actually went and they studied this to a far greater degree. And they found that mice essentially have what seems to be a sweet spot for the amount of movement and exercise that they need per day. And furthermore, it looks like humans may have that same threshold as well. So let's get into that right now. So the a form of exercise that helped to produce more of this new neurotransmitter called galanin. It's Galanin. Probably should be pronounced galanin, but that's okay. We'll pronounce it galanin, which is how they pronounce it in the studies. That aerobic-based exercise in mice and what is now being seen in humans, we just need more studies in humans, becomes increased with the aerobic exercise. So aerobic exercise produces more of this inhibitory, calming neurotransmitter. Now, there's some caveats to this. If you were going to have a stressful-based day tomorrow, going out and doing aerobic-based exercise today, after having not done it, would not necessarily work for tomorrow's stressful day. What they found was that it took weeks to work up to a certain threshold that then allowed this galanin to be much more free, so free floating within the body, and better able to be produced so that when the stressful event came up, your body was already able to better make this neurotransmitter, which is really interesting because we don't always know when our most stressful days and times will be. So the other interesting part of this study was that it was based on aerobic-based exercise and not necessarily high-intensity interval training, sprint interval training, or resistance training like with weights. So you know that I'm a big proponent, of course, of working out with weights. I'm a big proponent of high-intensity interval training, sprint interval training. There's no doubt about it. But I keep going back to that there's a time and place for aerobic-based training. Aerobic-based training is what's going to help the lymphatic system to a greater degree. It's going to calm cortisol levels. It's going to better bring down blood sugar levels. That's really important to note as well. And it seems it's what's going to help better produce anti-anxiolytic, inhibitory neurotransmitters like galanin as well. So if you know someone that's dealing with depression, anxiety, irritability, overwhelm, we need to start to work in some aerobic exercise into their weekly routine. Now, for mice, what it seemed, their perfect threshold seems to be, at least for these particular mice, the lab-based mice, they seem to need about a 10K worth of exercise per day. That seems to be the sweet spot for these mice that were studied. Now, for humans, that's a 10K is somewhere 6.2 miles, if my old track and cross-country days serve me well. So that's 6.2 miles for your average mouse. Now, that's really interesting because if I look at that and I look at the equivalent to about 10,000 or so steps per day, it's not that much less for a human being. So I'm wondering, and then again, this is just theory, that around the 10,000 steps per day may be the sweet spot for what most human beings need. Now, I want to take this, though, one step further, because if you're already getting your 10,000 steps per day, then I believe we need to take it to the next level, because 10,000 steps is great, but you're not necessarily jogging or biking or swimming, which is going to allow for more of that aerobic-based benefit, which is going to allow for a mild stressor in the body, right? Increasing the heart rate maybe to the low 100s. That's going to get that blood pumping. That's going to get the lymphatic system moving, right? That's going to boost endorphins. All of these, I believe, are very, very important as well. So here's what I want to share with you. 10,000 steps per day may just be the sweet spot. We've talked about this many, many times before. But after that, I need you to graduate. After that, I need to start to add in a little bit of whether it be jogging or biking or swimming or anything aerobic based that's going to get that heart rate up for a sustained period of time. You might say, well, how long do I need to do it for? Well, it seems that you're going to probably want to shoot for somewhere around the 20 to 30 minute mark as your minimum, but you won't need much more than that as a maximum. So that means most likely you'll never need to do really more than 30 minutes of aerobic-based work 3 to 4 times maximum per week. And the studies are seeming to bear that out right now, because you cannot get all of the benefit from doing this every single day for a week. What actually is more beneficial is multiple times per week, not just a weekend warrior doing it once or twice on the weekend, but actually get it in 3-4 times during the week in order to be able to improve the adaptive response of your body. So that's definitely my recommendation. I always like to be able to give you a really straightforward way to do this. So this is what I would recommend, and I'm going to keep this super beginner, and then I'm going to allow you to expand upon that. I talk about this in my book, The Rain Barrel Effect, of course. I actually give you a bunch of different programs to follow. But what you want to look at is, and this is really important, I believe, obviously I'm not the first person to say this, but exercise really is medicine. It seems that exercise, even now more than ever, seems to be continued to be proven that without it, your body is not all that it can be or should be. Let me just say that one more time. If you are not exercising, you are not as healthy as that you could be. Like, you might be a totally healthy human being right now, but if you're not exercising, and that includes doing aerobic, because I have a lot of friends that do a lot of weightlifting, but they don't do a lot of aerobic-based activity because they don't feel that it helps them transform their body, build bigger muscles. And I get it. From a purely aesthetic standpoint, you don't ever need to do any aerobic-based cardio to look your best. There's just no doubt about that, right? And that was like the 20-something-year-old me. I was helping people transform their bodies, getting down to single-digit body fat. We didn't need to do aerobic-based cardio. But again, that's why, and I shared this with my health coaching team the other day, you have to be really careful listening to advice of people in their 20s. And I know that's controversial, and I know a lot of people out there in their 20s that they're going to get upset at me saying that. I was in my 20s once as well, and I get it. What I say is this: there's a lot of brilliant people in their 20s, but what happens is you just haven't lived enough life to realize that there are tens of thousands of studies out there on both sides of the equation. And typically there's not one right answer on one side. And so what I would say is this: if that you're in your 20s and you're giving health advice to people, just make sure it's not just based on your equation of health, which a lot of times in our 20s we get wrapped up with, like that we see everything as kind of brand new and we've made this discovery and we want to share it with the world. I get it. I love that excitement. I was there as well, but I want to just temper that with giving people the right advice, right? And understand that people are coming things from different paths in life as well. So it's just very different talking to somebody in their 40s where they've had 2 or 3 kids and a lot of sleepless nights and they've lived a lot more life to say, okay, this is necessarily what this individual should be doing. And again, what I want to share with you is this, is that there's a time and place for everything. But if we want to keep people healthy for the long run, it is always about creating what's called dynamic equilibrium. And so I think it would behoove a lot of people to begin to add more aerobic-based exercise into their routine, and for a lot of health and wellness professionals out there to also look at diet and exercise from a more holistic standpoint and not keep recommending diet plans that are really too far to one side and exercise plans that are just way too hard and pushed to one side. We need to do this for the long run. We need to do this for the good and health of all people. And I think you'll find that, again, a much more normal and balanced nutrition plan and a much more normal and balanced exercise plan is always going to be the right decision in the long run. So, and again, I'm not talking about getting ready for a bodybuilding show. I'm not getting ready for an event. I'm talking about your average individual, which is what most people are that as practitioners we work with. So as I'm giving you a schedule here, I want you to look at this. We need to adopt exercise as really a part of our daily routine. That has to come with the first mind shift that we have. And so we basically have to say to ourselves, we're carving out 30 minutes every single day for exercise. Now, that's not going to happen in your schedule most likely overnight, but over time, we really want to set that as our foundation, because exercising is what's going to give you back the energy, the strength, the endurance, the stamina, and the longevity that you're looking for. So dedicate that 30 minutes, whether it's first thing in the day, towards the end of the day, at lunch, whatever it might be. But how I look at it is this. You can do a very simple every other day routine in order to be able to take back your overall health. And Mondays can be a resistance training workout. Tuesdays could be your aerobic-based cardio. Wednesdays could be resistance training workout number 2. Thursdays could be aerobic cardio workout number 2. Fridays, resistance training number 3. Saturdays, cardio number 3, and then Sundays would be off. You might say, well, that sounds like a ton of exercise. You have to keep in mind, as human beings, we are meant to move our body every day. We actually weren't meant to sit at these desks and behind, a driver's seat all day long. We were meant to be moving our body, hunting, gathering. That is what this human body was meant to do. So we're talking about 30 minutes every single day. We're not talking about 8 hours. 10 hours of even moving our body. So 30 minutes is really what we're talking about. And remember, it doesn't have to be a hard workout. Your resistance training could simply be body weight training in the beginning, right? If you're not used to working out, well, then push-ups and squats and lunges, all of these things can be done body weight wise. You can even just do 1 set. And your cardio, well, that's when it can be just walking in the beginning. 3,500 steps a day. The next week, 4,500 steps. The week after that, 5,500 steps a day until you work up to the 10,000 steps a day. Now, once you feel comfortable there, what do? Well, we can start to then add in more of the aerobic-based component. We can start to get on the bike. We can start to go for a jog, and we can work our way up to the 20 minutes, work our way up to the 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be all at once. But I'm telling you right now, again, if you're someone that's been dealing with a lot of the irritability, the overwhelm, overstressed, more of a depressed-based state, adding more of this aerobic-based component of exercise into your routine is being proven now over and over to better allow you to adapt to stress. So I wanted to share this with you. I'm going to be doing a lot more of this teaching in January, so stay tuned, because a lot of this same teaching is what's allowing people to improve their overall telomere length and improve their overall longevity. So I'm going to be talking a lot more about longevity, a lot more about telomeres, and a lot more on the overall anti-aging based systems that we are developing and will be teaching more in January. So stay tuned for that. Again, thank you so much for all the comments, which led to this particular show. And if you'd like to look at your current stress levels right now or your other neurotransmitters, you can just go to stevencabral.com/labs. You can click on the stress hormones, mood and metabolism test, or you can click on the mood and neurotransmitters test, and you can check out either one of those. Very simple to do right at home. And I believe they're going to be greatly beneficial for taking your health to that next level. So thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you, and I will talk with you tomorrow. Take care. Thank you so much for just tuning into today's show. And before you go, I want to make sure that you know that Equilife has done it again. We are actually giving away a limited supply of free vitamin D tests all this week while supplies last over at Equilife. Head on over to stevencabral.com/Equilife to see if you qualify for a free vitamin D lab test. This is a lab test that you can use yourself or anyone actually in the family to test your vitamin D levels. Remember, you cannot guess, you must test, and that especially goes for vitamin D. If you want to know if you're at the optimal level of sun, of getting a tan, of taking a vitamin D supplement, the only way that you will know if you are at your optimal level of vitamin D is to test. And that is why we want to give away this $99 lab test completely free on all qualifying orders while supplies last over at Equilife right now. Head on over to stevencabral.com/Equilife for all the details and grab your vitamin D test before they're gone.